4th annual Charleston Forum to address issues such as race and education will happen on June 14th this year, but it will be virtually. I sit down one-on-one with the CEO of the Charleston Forum, Duffy, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Duffy, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, sir. So glad to be with you again.
You're very welcome. Obviously, you are the chairman of the board of directors and the CEO of the Charleston Forum.
That's right. They keep having me. I keep coming back. You can't get rid of me.
Well, you're a very important person in this town for very important reasons, because the Charleston Forum hosts their 4th annual event this year, and you just talked to me about it off camera, but results from the Charleston Forum's Tri-County Survey will focus on racial attitudes and will be discussed during the forum, that is. What's one result when it comes to racial attitudes in Charleston that has changed you as a person?
Well, you know what I really, I mean, there's so much from the survey that we're going to reveal, and a lot of it is very positive agreement from big majorities on the principles of what we want done. But one thing that struck me, and I hate to steal any panelists' thunder on this, but it really just sticks with me from the results, is that there's a lot of agreement on basic principles of how we should have police behave, how we should have educational opportunities, et cetera. But where there's a marked difference in sort of, I guess, the consensus, there's a lack of consensus, is how we deal with what I see as more emotional issues of race, with statutes, flags, and that type of thing. And what I wonder is, how much does that division or difference in approach hinder making progress on the more substantive, as I would call it, more practical, more everyday type issues we have in society?
And I'm actually sitting 1 block away from the John C. Calhoun statue right here on Calhoun Street. Where does that come into the discussion with the Charleston Forum?
Well, Quintin, we've identified through our board efforts early on the topics we wanted to focus on as the forum, and we saw as the primary issues and drivers of what needed to be addressed based on issues of race: education, economics, criminal justice, and policing. And that last one that we have is the future of the past. And as I mentioned before, I think that those ties, or people's ties to those types of things, could be an impediment to how we address a lot of other issues, and I could be wrong about that. But I think there's a lot more than just a symbol that's associated with those types of monuments. John C. Calhoun was a prominent figure in the U.S. history, and should have some recognition for being a prominent figure. He also held some horrendous views, and the fact that he is towering above our city's major it's not public space, but major park, is it's troubling for a lot of people. And so, the way I look at it is, how much does it matter to someone who isn't troubled by it to keep it? What good is it doing for that person? And can you at least acknowledge that it is offensive to a lot of other people? So what good are you preserving by hanging on to that, instead of taking down something you acknowledge is legitimately offensive? That's a sort of what I see as an objective, rational view of those types of things. But I recognize that those issues are really bound with a lot more emotion than objectivity.
And you talk about the future of the past. What's Charleston's future of the past?
Well, that's a great question. And, there's obviously a lot more momentum now to address our past in a different way. And I think the forum, I would like to suggest that the forum has had a good bit to do with that over the years, of really shining a light on a lot of these issues and how we've just kind of grown with them, rather than standing back and addressing and analyzing, wait a second, why? We had one of our panelists the first year talking about taking a carriage tour, and the operator was describing how, X percentage of the residents lived here, the French lived in this part, and that equaled 100%. And he's like, well, what about African Americans? Where were they? They're nowhere in your story. And so, I think that those kind of objective looks at, wait a second, what have we been describing and living with, and how can we approach that in a different way, because it's clearly not a complete story and not an entirely accurate story. And I think our survey addressing these things now, and Charleston's 350th year, is a really great timing for us to look at those issues.
And when you look at the Charleston Forum and Charleston 350, where does your mind go to?
Well, exactly that. I mean, I think that the future of the past is a wonderful, it's a topic that is timely when we're taking a look at our history. And so I think it's a good time to say, well, where should we be going now? Here's where we are, and here's what people's attitudes are. Where do we want to be going forward? Let's take a step back and look at ourselves as an entire community, and how do we want to represent ourselves going forward? How do we want to raise our kids with certain statues or whatever it is around? Is that the story we want to keep telling?
In the press release, it goes on to say this June marks the 5th year anniversary of the Mother Emanuel tragedy, in which 9 African Americans were killed during Bible study in Charleston, South Carolina. 5 years to now, Brian, who is Charleston?
That's a good question. I think we're a lot different than we were in the days after the Mother Emanuel massacre. We felt when we got this going, it was just such a wave of optimism toward unity and addressing issues of race. And bit by bit over the years, we haven't had that same reaction. And it's been harder for us to keep the traction that we had and to get things going. And now here we are with another issue on the national scene that has generated that same momentum. And I think it's a big question of what can we do with it, and can we hold on to it?
And obviously, a lot of people are still talking about the death of George Floyd. How do you look at it as a Charlestonian, and how do you look at it as a lawyer?
Well, first, as a Charlestonian, obviously it's a national issue, and I'm glad that it is generating a lot of awareness and driving a lot of action so far. It isn't the Charleston Police Department, for example, who has really made great strides and it's a national effort with their illumination project, et cetera. So I don't think it speaks to the Charleston Police Department, which isn't to say there isn't room to grow, as Pete Reynolds said yesterday. He's trying, it's a constant process, et cetera. But what I did find, what was so unique about the reaction or the event, the tragic events at Mother Emanuel they were purely about race. And everybody, that really grabbed people. It's like, wait a second, wow, this is really happening because of racial hatred. Not long before that was the killing of Walter Scott, but it wasn't, in people's eyes, it wasn't exactly always a racial issue. People would say, well, he shouldn't have been in that situation where he was running from police. And that would allow people a way not to address it, not to address policing with a racial lens. I think there has been growth nationally in that people see George Floyd's death primarily through a racial lens, which I think is healthy because it needs to be seen that way if we're ever going to address those problems that we have, not just locally, but as a nation. As a lawyer, wow. I mean, the question is just how criminal was it? The basics of criminal law really focus on the intent of the actor, and certainly we know the intent of one of them, and I think it's going to be a big question of how you just to what degree you can establish that for the others.
And obviously, the press release goes on to say this: as the Charleston Forum is gearing up for its 4th annual event, racial issues are being discussed at a national level. Once again, here we are. Well-intended people understand changes need to be made to address problems of race, but do not know where to start. What racial issues are being discussed at the national level right now besides George Floyd?
Well, I think we're going to try to push that, Quintin, and that a lot of people see this as, everybody wants to talk about chokeholds and about, this is a way bigger issue, and people's protests are based on way bigger issues of equity and how are we going to reconcile our goals and ideals as a nation with where we find ourselves? And I think we're having a much more objective look of where we are with those things. And the Charleston Forum, as you know, has identified what we see as primary issues to address: education, economics, policing, yes, and criminal justice. But without a global approach, barring a few police tactics, will be a huge failure for this moment.
And where should the well-intended people start to address those problems?
Lots of places, Quintin. We have, the way I look at it is you can do it through public policy issues and pressing for change in public policies. And what the forum is doing right now, my superstar college-bound niece is cataloging the videos from every year of the forum and identifying what proposals for change have been made. And we're going to take that and build a platform through this year. This year the forum event is designed mostly to reveal and discuss our view of ourselves. Where are we right now, and where do we want to be? And then we'll focus on how we get there. And fortunately, I believe we're going to have your collaboration to go discuss the proposals with people out in the community, the stakeholders who are in charge of these organizations, the constituents who are the recipients of the services, and what ideas they have for what needs to change in our Charleston Tri-County area.
And you also said this.
Can I stop you for just a second, quick? Because the one thing I left off, which we really learned a lot about through our years in the forum, is there's so many other groups out there. So beyond the public policy angle, you can get involved in the community. If you're interested in education, you have the Cradle to Career Collaborative, the Charleston Promise Neighborhood,
right.
Wings for Kids. These organizations are out there. If you want to make a difference, look them up, see what speaks to you, and get involved. I mean, that's a place where you can make change. And there's also the everyday interactions and your social interactions and choices, et cetera, in your personal life and your business and those types of things that are less of a grand scale of making a difference. But you'd be surprised, how your attitude and your actions can impact someone else.
And the press release goes on to say this: we have to learn, relearn, and continue learning how to approach racial issues within our community. We strive for Charleston and South Carolina to be recognized as leaders in addressing racial issues, and as a community that refuses to allow June 17, 2015 at Mother Emanuel to become just another historical marker. How do you relearn things in the educational system, finances, equity?
Well, you have to keep looking, keep digging. You have to use the resources that you have. And, for example, the Cradle to Career Collaborative has done as in-depth a review of how the educational system is failing certain people and what lines those break down along, and the best ways to fix them. If you can't get behind something like that and test them, there's no perfect answer. I tell everyone, there's no magic wand that just makes everything great. You have to try, and you have to see what works and what doesn't. And so you have to relearn how this is affecting people. It's a fluid situation. People's attitudes change. You can do more with, you can take, I guess, more aggressive and broader steps when you have more people behind you. So you have to constantly evaluate where you are and I think what can be done.
And obviously, this is the 4th year anniversary of the Charleston Forum. Who, what, when, where, why, and how this year?
Well, it's going to be different than most, and that's obviously, a forced issue from the pandemic we're all dealing with. But I think it's really a great change for us because we've gotten great reactions to the events we've had so far, the webinars, with Congressman Clyburn, Stacey Abrams, Senator Scott, Chief Acevedo, who was testifying before Congress just this week. And so what we have is a group of 5 individuals who have unique experiences and expertise to bring to these various issues that we address. And they've dug into the survey and did a crosstabs to see how people of different demographics are responding to the different questions, to identify, okay, here's where we agree on something, but here's where most people acknowledge we're not meeting that goal. Now, here are a couple of questions about ways maybe we could meet it. Would you support it? Would you not? So we have, John Simpkins, who's now the new head of the MDC charitable group started by Governor Sanford, I believe, in North Carolina years ago. He's our moderator, and I tell you what, he's moderated these other discussions for us, and I don't think there's anyone better. So he's well informed and just does a great job leading the discussion. So we have him. We have Dr. Powers from the College of Charleston, who is, just the preeminent scholar on African American issues in the Charleston area. And
he was my professor.
I'm sorry?
He was my professor.
Oh, great. See, he does a great job. And we have Dr. Alpert from University of South Carolina, a nationally recognized leader in criminology and police tactics and that sort of thing. And we have James Island native, I'm a James Island native also, who is Dr. White, Josie White, who is the charter school teacher of the year, and she teaches through online education. So I think that's going to be a great perspective to bring to the education topic. And KJ Kearney, who has been a friend of the forum and really helps advance the agenda in Charleston, will be offering his perspectives, and he has an education background. And we also added a topic for this discussion is engagement, engaging in these issues, and I think he'll have some good comments there. And Brian Hicks, everyone knows, is, I really think of him as the conscience of Charleston. And so people might not like to hear what he says a lot of times, but it sure is hard to argue the way he puts it out there. So I'm interested in hearing what he has to say, as particularly in this 350th year, looking at these survey results. So, I think it's going to be an exciting, interesting panel, lots of different perspectives. And, we're going to provide the survey results online for people to go dive into themselves. We're going to be inviting everyone to comment on what proposals will get us to our goals.
And speaking of diving in, how can I dive into the conversation and listen into the forum?
Well, you can go to our website under the 2020 event and webinars, and there's a link there that you can, hopefully you'll register for and follow. You can ask questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom webinar. And, I hate to say it because I want people to register and get involved that way, but we'll be live streaming on Facebook as we've done in the past also.
That's amazing. Well, Brian Duffy, thank you again for your time here on Quintin's Close-Ups, and good luck to you with the forum.
Thanks so much, Quintin. Look forward to working together in the coming months.
Exactly right.